The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air from the morning shootout when Nora Jenkins stepped onto the dusty main street of Ogden, Utah, carrying nothing but a worn carpet bag and the weight of her late husband's debts. She had arrived on the afternoon train in the summer of 1878, a widow at 23, with no family and fewer prospects, hoping the West would offer her something the crowded streets of Philadelphia never could: a fresh start. The sun blazed overhead as she walked past the saloon where two men lay dead in front, their blood already drying in the relentless heat, and she wondered if coming here had been the biggest mistake of her life. The boarding house stood at the end of the street, a weathered two-story building that leaned slightly to the left, as if tired from years of supporting weary travelers. Mrs. Patterson, the owner, was a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through to a person's soul. She looked Nora up and down before naming her price for a room. $3 a week, meals included, but you will earn your keep. I need help in the kitchen and with the laundry. Nora nodded, too exhausted to negotiate. She had exactly $17 to her name, which meant she had less than 6 weeks to find proper employment before she would be on the street. The room Mrs. Patterson showed her was small, barely large enough for the narrow bed and washstand it contained, but it had a window that overlooked the mountains in the distance, and that was enough. That first night, Nora lay awake listening to the sounds of Ogden settling into darkness. Somewhere a piano played off-key, punctuated by raucous laughter. Gunshots rang out twice, followed by shouting. A woman screamed, then went silent. This was not the civilized world she had known, where society's rules, however suffocating, at least provided some measure of safety. Here, it seemed, only strength and quickness mattered. She thought of Thomas, her husband of only 8 months before he had died of pneumonia, leaving her with nothing but his gambling debts. The creditors had taken everything, even her mother's silver brush. She had loved him once, or thought she had, but his legacy was poverty and shame. Coming west had been her only option when one of the debt collectors had suggested another way she might repay what was owed. She had left Philadelphia that very night. Morning came too early. Mrs. Patterson rapped sharply on her door at 5 o'clock, expecting her downstairs immediately. The kitchen was already hot from the stove, and a mountain of potatoes waited to be peeled. Another woman worked silently at the counter, her face bearing the yellowish remnants of bruises. She did not look up when Nora entered. "That is Constance," Mrs. Patterson said curtly. "She will show you what needs doing. I expect the boarders fed by 6:30. The work was hard and endless. Nora's hands, once soft and carefully tended, grew red and raw from the lye soap and hot water. She peeled potatoes, scrubbed floors, hauled water, and learned to manage the temperamental stove that heated unevenly and smoked when the wind blew from the east. Constance remained mostly silent, speaking only when necessary, and Nora learned not to press for conversation. The boarders were a rotating collection of miners, ranch hands, and drifters, most of whom ate their meals quickly and left without acknowledgement. A few made comments that brought heat to Nora's cheeks, but Mrs. Patterson ran a respectable establishment and would not tolerate outright disrespect under her roof. What the men did or said outside her doors was beyond her jurisdiction. 3 weeks passed in this monotonous routine before everything changed. It was early morning before the boarders had risen, and Nora was in the kitchen grinding coffee beans for breakfast. She had found a certain peace in this task, the repetitive motion of turning the handle, the rich aroma that rose from the grinder, the quiet moment before the day's chaos began. She worked slowly, methodically, almost meditatively, letting her mind wander to dreams of somehow saving enough money to open her own small shop, perhaps a bakery or a dress shop, something respectable that would provide independence. She did not hear him enter. One moment she was alone with her thoughts and the coffee grinder, and the next a voice spoke from behind her, low and warm like honey and tea. "You take your time with that." Nora jumped, nearly dropping the grinder, and spun around to find a man leaning against the doorframe, watching her with an expression of quiet amusement. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway, and he wore the dust-covered clothes of someone who had ridden hard and far. His hat was pushed back, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw, and despite the trail dust, there was something undeniably striking about him. "I apologize," he said, straightening. "Did not mean to startle you, Mrs. Patterson said I could wait in here for breakfast. The other room was getting a bit loud for my taste." Nora pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart racing. "You should not sneak up on people. You are right. That was poorly done." He moved into the kitchen properly, and she noticed he walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. "I am Ryder Morgan. Just rode in last night, took a room upstairs." "Nora Jenkins," she replied, turning back to the coffee grinder, suddenly self-conscious. She resumed her work, aware of his eyes on her. "You grind those beans slow," he observed, moving closer to watch. "Most folks rush through it, but you are taking your time doing it proper. Makes better coffee that way." "It seems pointless to rush something that matters," Nora said, focusing on the grinder rather than looking at him. There was something about his presence that made the kitchen feel smaller, the air harder to breathe. He was quiet for a moment, and she could feel him studying her. "Where did you learn to grind coffee like that?" "My mother," Nora answered before she could stop herself. "She said anything worth doing was worth doing well, even the small things, especially the small things." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "Was," Nora confirmed softly. "She died when I was 16. "I am sorry." The sympathy in his voice sounded genuine, and Nora risked a glance at him. His expression was open, kind, and she felt something shift in her chest, a crack in the walls she had built around herself since Thomas died. "How long are you staying in Ogden?" she asked, partly to change the subject, partly because she found herself wanting to know. "That depends," Ryder said, pulling out a chair and sitting down as if he belonged there. "I am supposed to be passing through on my way to Wyoming, but I have learned not to plan too far ahead. Life has a way of changing your direction when you least expect it." Before Nora could respond, Mrs. Patterson's voice rang out from the hallway. "Mr. Morgan, your breakfast will be ready shortly." "Nora, the other boarders are waking. We need to move faster." Ryder caught Nora's eye and gave her a small smile that made her stomach flutter in a way she had not felt in years, if ever. He stood and headed toward the dining room but paused in the doorway. "Grind them for me every morning," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Coffee that good deserves to be a daily pleasure." Then he was gone, leaving Nora standing in the kitchen with the grinder in her hands and her thoughts in complete disarray. It was not what he said but how he said it, as if he was already planning to stay, as if her presence was reason enough. "Mrs. Patterson appeared, her sharp eyes taking in Nora's flushed face. "Do not get ideas about that one. Drifters are all the same. They pass through and leave broken hearts behind." "I do not have any ideas," Nora said, but even to her own ears the denial sounded weak. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of cooking and serving, but Nora found herself acutely aware of Ryder's presence in the dining room. She caught glimpses of him through the doorway, noticed how he ate with better manners than most of the men, how he thanked her politely each time she refilled his coffee. When the other men made crude jokes, he did not join in. When one of them said something particularly offensive about a woman who passed by the window, Ryder's expression hardened, and his voice carried clearly. "That is someone's daughter, someone's sister. Show some respect." The room went quiet, tension suddenly thick in the air. The other man, a burly miner named Jack Sutton, stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You telling me how to talk, stranger?" Ryder remained seated, but something in his posture changed, became alert, ready. "I am suggesting you remember your manners. Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable establishment." For a moment, Nora thought violence would erupt in the dining room. Her hands gripped the coffee pot tightly, her knuckles white. Then Jack Sutton laughed, breaking the tension. "All right, friend. No harm meant, just making conversation." But his eyes promised that this was not over, and Nora felt a chill of worry for the stranger who had defended a woman's honor without being asked. After breakfast, as Nora cleared the tables, Ryder approached her. Up close, she could see the sun lines around his eyes, the small scar on his left cheekbone, the way his hair curled slightly at the collar. "Thank you for the excellent coffee," he said. "Best I have had in longer than I can remember." "It is just coffee," Nora replied, but she could not help the small smile that tugged at her lips. "Nothing is just anything when it is done with care." He hesitated, then added, "I noticed you favoring your right hand." "The lye soap." Nora glanced down at her reddened, chapped hands, embarrassed. She had tried to hide them in her apron, but clearly not well enough. "It is nothing, just part of the work." "My mother used to make a salve," Ryder said. "Beeswax and sweet almond oil worked wonders. There is an apothecary in town that might have something similar." "I cannot afford luxuries," Nora said more sharply than she intended. Ryder's expression softened. "Not a luxury if it keeps your hands from bleeding and getting infected. That would prevent you from working at all." He was right, of course, but Nora's pride stung. She did not want his pity or his charity. "I will manage." "I am sure you will," he agreed, but something in his tone suggested he did not intend to let the matter drop entirely. Over the next week, Ryder made no move to continue his journey to Wyoming. Each morning, Nora ground the coffee beans slowly, carefully, and each morning he was there, watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. They fell into a pattern of conversation, small exchanges that gradually grew longer, more personal. She learned that he had been raised on a ranch in Colorado, that his parents had died in a fire when he was 19, that he had spent the last 8 years working as a ranch hand, a trail guide, whatever honest work he could find. He had fought in the Indian Wars but would not talk about it beyond acknowledging he had been there. The limp, she discovered, came from a horse falling on him 3 years ago, breaking his leg in 2 places. It had healed crooked, leaving him unable to do some of the harder ranch work he once had. "So you drift," Nora said one morning as she ground the coffee. "I prefer to think of it as staying open to possibility," Ryder replied with a hint of humor. "That is a prettier way of saying the same thing." He laughed, and the sound warmed something inside her that had been cold for a long time. "You are not wrong. What about you? What brought you to Ogden?" Nora's hand stilled on the grinder. She had avoided this question, knowing it would come eventually but not ready to expose the shame of her circumstances. "I needed a new start." "We all have pasts we would rather not discuss," Ryder said gently. "No judgment here." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw only sincerity. No mockery, no suspicion, just patient understanding. The words spilled out before she could stop them. "I am a widow. My husband died less than a year after we married, and he left me with nothing but debts. The creditors took everything, and one of them suggested I could repay what was owed in other ways. I left that night with whatever I could carry." Ryder's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "Did he hurt you?" "No, I did not give him the chance. But I knew if I stayed, eventually I would run out of options." "That took courage, or desperation," Nora said bitterly. "Sometimes they are the same thing." Ryder leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "For what it is worth, I think you made the right choice. There is no shame in protecting yourself. The world does not see it that way. A woman alone is either a victim or a scandal waiting to happen. Then the world needs to change its seeing." Such a simple statement, but it struck something deep inside Nora. She had spent so long internalizing society's judgments, accepting that her value was determined by her relationship to men, first her father, then her husband, now her employer. The idea that the problem lay not with her but with the world's perception felt revolutionary. "You are quiet," Ryder observed after a moment. "I am thinking about what you said. Dangerous activity, thinking." His tone was light, teasing, and Nora found herself smiling despite herself. "Mrs. Patterson would agree with you. She prefers I focus on my work." As if summoned by her name, Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her expression stern. "Nora, those dishes are not going to wash themselves. Mr. Morgan, do you not have somewhere to be?" Ryder straightened, tipping his hat politely. "Yes, madam, I was just complimenting the coffee." "Then compliment it somewhere else. This is a kitchen, not a social club." After he left, Mrs. Patterson fixed Nora with a pointed stare. "I warned you about getting ideas. That man is trouble, mark my words. He has been nothing but respectful," Nora protested. "That is how it starts. Respectful, charming, making you feel special. Then one day he rides out and you are left behind, possibly with more troubles than you started with." Mrs. Patterson's voice was harsh, but her eyes held something that might have been concern. "I have seen it happen too many times to count." Do not become another cautionary tale. Nora wanted to argue, to defend Ryder, to defend herself, but what could she say? Mrs. Patterson was not entirely wrong. Ryder was a drifter, a man with no ties, no permanent home. Even if his interest in her was genuine, what future could there be in it? But knowing this did not stop her heart from lifting every morning when she saw him in the kitchen. It did not prevent the warmth that spread through her when he smiled. It did not make her immune to the way her skin tingled when his hand accidentally brushed hers as he reached for the coffee pot. 2 days later, Nora found a small jar on the kitchen table with a note in rough handwriting. "For your hands. Not charity, just one person helping another. RM." She opened the jar and smelled the sweet, waxy scent of the salve. Her throat tightened with emotion. When was the last time someone had noticed her pain and done something about it without expecting anything in return? She could not remember. That night, she applied the salve to her raw, cracked hands, and within days, they began to heal. The improvement was so marked that even Mrs. Patterson commented on it, though she said nothing about the jar's origin. Nora knew she should return it, should maintain proper distance, should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak Mrs. Patterson predicted. But she kept the jar, used it daily, and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to have someone care for her this way permanently. The fantasy seemed even more impossible when, one afternoon, she overheard Ryder talking with another boarder about Wyoming, about the ranch job that waited for him there, about how he should have been there weeks ago. "What is keeping you in Ogden?" the other man asked. There was a pause, long enough that Nora, washing dishes in the kitchen, held her breath. "Unfinished business," Ryder finally said. "Must be some business to risk losing a good job. Some things are worth the risk." Nora's hands trembled in the dishwater. Was she the unfinished business? The thought thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. She wanted to march out there and demand to know his intentions, but what right did she have? They had shared conversations and coffee, nothing more. He had given her salve for her hands. These were small kindnesses, not declarations of intent. But the way he looked at her felt like more than kindness. Sunday was Nora's half-day off, and she typically spent it doing her own laundry and mending her limited wardrobe. This particular Sunday, she decided to walk to the general store to purchase thread, and perhaps, if she could spare the money, a small length of ribbon. It was frivolous, but she had been so long without anything frivolous that the desire felt overwhelming. The store was quiet, and she was examining the ribbons, running her fingers over the smooth silk, when a voice behind her said, "The blue one matches your eyes." She turned to find Ryder standing there, hat in hand, looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "What are you doing here?" she asked, then realized how rude that sounded. "I mean, I did not expect to see you. I was hoping I might run into you, actually. It is your afternoon off, is it not?" "How did you know that?" Mrs. Patterson mentioned it. "Not directly to me, of course." She was complaining to Constance about being short-handed on Sundays, and I happened to overhear. Nora could not help but smile at his careful navigation of the truth. "And you just happened to come to the general store at this particular time." "I needed supplies," he said, then grinned. "And I hope to see you. Is that so terrible?" Her heart hammered in her chest. "Ryder, what are you doing? Mrs. Patterson says you are a drifter, that you are leaving for Wyoming any day now. Why are you seeking me out when you are just going to leave?" His smile faded and he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "What if I did not leave?" "What?" "I have been thinking about it. There are ranches around here that need hands. The pay might not be as good as Wyoming, but it would be steady work. I could stay in Ogden." "Why would you do that?" Nora asked, though her heart already knew the answer, hoped for the answer, feared the answer. "Because every morning I watch you grind coffee beans with more care and attention than most people give anything in their lives. Because you are brave enough to start over in a place where you know no one. Because when you smile, which is not nearly often enough, it feels like the sun coming out. Because I have been drifting for 8 years, and for the first time, I want to stay in one place." He paused, searching her face. "Because I am falling in love with you, Nora Jenkins, and I think you might be falling in love with me too." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Nora gripped the edge of the ribbon display to steady herself. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are kind to Constance even when she does not speak. I know you work yourself to exhaustion without complaint. I know you have been hurt but have not let it make you bitter. I know the sound of your laugh, which I have heard exactly 3 times and am determined to hear more. I know I would rather spend my life getting to know everything else than spend another day pretending I do not feel this way." Tears pricked Nora's eyes. "I am not what you think I am. I am a widow with nothing to my name, working as a servant. I have no prospects, no family, no future." "You are wrong about that last part. You have a future. Maybe if you let me, we could have a future together." "Ryder," she whispered, but she did not know what else to say. The hope rising in her chest was almost painful in its intensity. "I am not asking you to decide anything right now," he said softly. "I am just asking you to let me try, let me court you properly, let me prove I am not going anywhere. And if it does not work, if Mrs. Patterson refuses to let you visit, if people talk, people always talk, let them." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, where the salve had healed the worst of the damage. "I am a patient man, Nora. I will wait as long as it takes for you to trust this." Looking into his eyes, Nora made a decision that felt both reckless and inevitable. "I finish work at 8 o'clock every evening. Then I will be there at 8 o'clock every evening that you will have me. Mrs. Patterson will not approve. We will sit in the parlor where everything is proper and visible. She cannot object to that. Nora laughed, though it came out shaky. You do not know her very well. Then I will get to know her too. I am told I can be charming when the situation calls for it. I have noticed. They stood there in the general store, hands linked, the future suddenly full of possibility. Then the storekeeper cleared his throat loudly, reminding them they were not alone, and they stepped apart, both flushing. The blue ribbon, Ryder said. May I buy it for you? That would not be proper. Consider it payment for all the excellent coffee you have made me. A business transaction. That is a ridiculous justification. Nevertheless, he picked up the ribbon and carried it to the counter, paying before Nora could protest further. As they walked back toward the boarding house, maintaining a respectful distance, Nora felt lighter than she had in months, perhaps years. The weight of loneliness that had pressed down on her since Thomas died, maybe even before, had eased. She was still poor, still uncertain about her future, still living in a rough town where violence and hardship were commonplace. But none of that seemed quite as overwhelming with Ryder walking beside her. Tell me about the ranch where you were raised, she said. His face softened with memory. It was in the valley between two mountain ranges. We raised cattle and horses, had a creek running through the property that flooded every spring. My father built our house with his own hands, added on to it when I was born, then again when my sister came along. You have a sister, had. His voice went quiet. She died in the same fire that killed my parents. She was only 16. I am so sorry, Nora said, understanding now some of the sadness she sometimes glimpsed in his eyes. It was a long time ago. The grief does not go away, but you learn to carry it. He was quiet for a moment, then added, She would have liked you. Emma was always drawn to people who were stronger than they realized. I am not strong. You are still standing after everything that tried to knock you down. That is the definition of strength. They had reached the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson was visible through the front window, and her expression when she spotted them together was not pleased. I should go in, Nora said reluctantly. 8 o'clock, Ryder asked. 8 o'clock, she confirmed. True to his word, Ryder appeared in the boarding house parlor at precisely 8 o'clock that evening. He had cleaned up, changed his shirt, and combed his hair, and the effort he had made touched Nora deeply. Mrs. Patterson watched them like a hawk for the first hour, but when it became clear they were merely sitting and talking, she retreated to her own quarters, though she left her door conspicuously open. They talked about everything and nothing. Ryder told her about the places he had seen, the different jobs he had worked, the people he had met. Nora spoke of her childhood in Philadelphia, her mother's death, her father's remarriage to a woman who resented his first daughter. She even spoke of Thomas, something she had not done since arriving in Ogden. I thought I loved him, she admitted. Now I wonder if I just wanted to escape my father's house so badly that I convinced myself I felt something I did not. Were you happy with him? Ryder asked gently. Nora considered the question honestly. No, not unhappy exactly, but not happy either. He was kind enough when he was sober, but he gambled away every dollar he earned and some he did not. I spent 8 months worrying about money, about creditors, about what would happen to us. Then he got sick, and all I could think was that at least if he died, the worrying would stop. She looked down at her hands, shame flooding through her. What kind of person thinks that about their dying husband? A person who has been pushed past their limit, Ryder said firmly. Do not mistake exhaustion and relief for moral failure, Nora. You were in an impossible situation. That is generous. It is honest. And for what it is worth, what you described is not love. Love is not supposed to be a constant worry. It should bring peace, not chaos. "Have you been in love before?" Nora asked, curious. "Once, when I was younger. Her name was Sarah, and she was the daughter of a neighboring rancher. We had an understanding that we would marry when I turned 21. His expression grew distant. Then the fire happened. I had nothing left, no land, no prospects. Her father made it clear I was no longer an acceptable match. She married a banker from Denver 6 months later. Did it break your heart? At the time, I thought it did. Looking back, I think it broke my pride more than anything. I cared for her, but I am not sure I loved her, not the way I should have. If I had, I would have fought harder to keep her." "And now?" Nora asked softly. Ryder met her eyes. "Now I know the difference. Now I know what it feels like to want to fight for someone." The air between them felt charged, electric. Nora wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between them, but they were in the parlor where anyone could see, and she had her reputation to consider. As if reading her thoughts, Ryder smiled. "We have time. I am not going anywhere." That became their routine. Every evening at 8 o'clock, Ryder would arrive, and they would sit in the parlor, talking until Mrs. Patterson pointedly blew out the lamps at 10 o'clock, signaling it was time for him to leave. On Sundays, they would walk together through town, maintaining proper distance, nodding to neighbors who watched with varying degrees of curiosity and disapproval. Nora found herself living for these hours with Ryder. The work that had felt endless and exhausting became bearable because she knew she would see him at the end of each day. She caught herself smiling while grinding the coffee beans, remembering his words, "Grind them for me every morning." 6 weeks after their first conversation in the kitchen, Ryder came to the boarding house with news. He had secured a job at the Triple Creek Ranch, about 5 miles outside of Ogden. The pay was fair, and it came with a small cabin on the property. He would start the following week. "That is wonderful," Nora said, genuinely happy for him but feeling a pang of worry. 5 miles was not far, but it was not the same as having him right here in town. "Come with me," Ryder said suddenly. "What? Marry me. Come with me to the ranch." "The cabin is small, but it is ours if we want it. We could make a life there." Nora's breath caught. "Ryder, we have known each other for only 6 weeks. I know, it is too fast, it is reckless, it is everything people would say it is." He took her hands in his. "But I am 30 years old, Nora. I have spent the last 8 years drifting, never putting down roots, never letting myself want anything permanent because I was afraid of losing it like I lost everything before. Then I met you, and suddenly I want everything. I want a home. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to watch you grind coffee beans slowly because you do it with such care. I want to make you laugh. I want to give you the future you said you did not have. So yes, it is fast, but when you know something is right, why wait?" Tears streamed down Nora's face. Everything he said echoed her own feelings, the same desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found something real and lasting. But fear held her back. What if it does not work? What if I am not what you need? What if you wake up one day and regret tying yourself to a woman with nothing? "You are not nothing," Ryder said fiercely. "And the only thing I would regret is letting you go because I was too cowardly to risk my heart. I am asking you to risk yours too. I know that is terrifying after what you have been through. But I promise you, Nora, I will spend every day proving that you can trust me with it." She wanted to say yes. Every fiber of her being screamed to say yes. But the memory of Thomas, of creditors, of barely escaping a life she could not bear, held her back. "Can I have time to think about it?" she asked. Disappointment flashed across Ryder's face, but he nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need. The job starts next week, but I can travel back and forth until you are ready." After he left, Nora sat in the parlor, her mind in turmoil. Mrs. Patterson found her there an hour later, still sitting in the dark. He asked you to marry him, the older woman said. It was not a question. How did you know? I have eyes. The way he looks at you, it was only a matter of time. Mrs. Patterson sat down heavily in her chair. What did you tell him? That I needed time to think. Smart girl. You think I should say no? Mrs. Patterson was quiet for a long moment. I think you should be careful. I think 6 weeks is not long enough to know someone. I think men make promises they cannot keep. But I also think. She paused, seeming to struggle with the words. I think I may have been wrong about him. He has been nothing but respectful. He secured honest work instead of drifting on. He has courted you properly, in full view, making his intentions clear. Those are not the actions of a man looking for a quick dalliance. Nora looked at her employer in surprise. I thought you disapproved. I disapprove of carelessness and broken hearts, but I cannot fault a man for falling in love, nor a woman for being loved. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. You are a good worker, Nora, but more than that, you are a good person. You deserve happiness. I just want to make sure you are choosing it for the right reasons. What are the right reasons? Only you can answer that. But ask yourself this. Are you saying yes because you love him, or because you are afraid of being alone? The question haunted Nora all night. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to untangle her motivations. Was her love for Ryder real? Or was it just gratitude and loneliness dressed up as romance? How could she know for certain? Then she remembered something her mother had told her years ago when Nora had asked how she knew her father was the right man to marry. When I thought about my future, her mother had said, I could not imagine it without him. Not because I needed him to survive, but because every joy seemed sweeter when I imagined sharing it with him, and every hardship seemed bearable if he was beside me. Nora thought about her future now. She imagined the small cabin Ryder had described, imagined waking up beside him, grinding coffee for them both, building a life together. The image filled her with warmth and hope. Then she imagined staying at the boarding house, watching him ride out to the ranch without her, seeing him only on Sundays and occasional evenings. That image brought a hollowness to her chest that felt like grief. It was not that she could not survive without him. She had proven she could survive almost anything. But did she want to? Did she want to spend her life merely surviving when happiness was within reach, if only she was brave enough to take it? By morning, she had her answer. Ryder did not come to the boarding house that evening. When 8 o'clock passed, then 9, Nora felt panic rising in her chest. Had she hurt him so badly with her hesitation that he had decided not to return? Had he reconsidered his proposal at 10 o'clock? There was a knock on the kitchen door. Nora rushed to open it, finding Ryder standing there, hat in hand, looking apologetic. I am sorry for the late hour. There was trouble in town. Jack Sutton got drunk and started a fight. The sheriff asked me to help break it up since I was there. It took longer than expected. Relief flooded through her. Are you all right? A few bruises, nothing serious. Sutton got the worst end of it. He paused. I should let you get your rest. I just wanted you to know I had not forgotten about coming by. Ryder, wait. Nora stepped out into the cool night air, pulling the door closed behind her. I have an answer for you. She saw hope and fear war in his expression. You do? Yes. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. My answer is yes, I will marry you. The joy that broke across his face was like the sun rising. He swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around once before setting her down gently. Are you certain? I am terrified, Nora admitted. But I am certain. I love you, Ryder Morgan. I want to build a life with you. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I will spend every day making sure you never regret this choice. He kissed her then, the first time their lips had met, and it was everything Nora had dreamed and more, sweet and gentle and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "We should tell Mrs. Patterson," Nora said. "Now, it is after 10. She is probably still awake, waiting to scold me for being outside with you unchaperoned." Sure enough, when they went inside, Mrs. Patterson was in the parlor, a lamp burning low. She took one look at their faces and sighed. "You said yes." "I did," Nora confirmed. To their surprise, Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Then I suppose congratulations are in order. When is the wedding?" Ryder and Nora looked at each other. They had not discussed details in their excitement. "As soon as possible," Ryder said. "I start work at the ranch next week. I would like Nora to come with me as my wife." "That is fast," Mrs. Patterson said. "We know," Nora replied, "but we are sure." Mrs. Patterson studied them both, then nodded. "Very well. There is a minister in town who can perform the ceremony. You will need a witness. I suppose I can serve, and we can ask Constance to be the second." "You would do that?" Nora asked, touched. "I have grown fond of you, girl, even if I did not show it well. I want to see you properly settled." She looked at Ryder sternly. "Treat her right, or you will answer to me." "Yes, madam," Ryder said seriously. "You have my word." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Nora wore her best dress, the dark blue one she had brought from Philadelphia, and Ryder had pinned a wildflower to his lapel. Mrs. Patterson and Constance stood as witnesses, and Constance even smiled, a rare sight that made the occasion feel even more special. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed Nora with such tenderness that she felt tears spring to her eyes. This was nothing like her first wedding, a hasty affair motivated by her desire to escape and Thomas's need for a wife to make him appear more respectable. This felt real, felt right, felt like the beginning of something beautiful. After the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson hosted a small meal at the boarding house. Some of the other boarders joined, and even Jack Sutton, sporting a black eye from his recent fight, offered gruff congratulations. It was not a grand celebration, but it was filled with genuine warmth. As evening approached, Ryder loaded Nora's few belongings into a wagon he had borrowed from the ranch. Mrs. Patterson hugged her tightly. "You are always welcome here if you need anything," she said quietly. "Do not be a stranger." "I will visit," Nora promised. "Thank you for everything. For giving me work, for the advice, for standing up for me today. Just be happy. That is thanks enough." The ride to the ranch took over an hour. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the mountains in the distance looked like they were on fire. Nora sat close to Ryder on the wagon seat, his arm around her shoulders, and felt more at peace than she could ever remember feeling. The Triple Creek Ranch was larger than she had expected, with a main house, several barns, and a dozen small cabins scattered across the property for the ranch hands. Ryder pointed out the landmarks as they passed. The creek itself, running full from mountain snowmelt, the pastures where cattle grazed, the breaking pen where young horses were trained. Their cabin was at the edge of the property, nestled against a grove of cottonwood trees. It was small, as Ryder had warned, just 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and a window that faced the mountains. But it was clean and well built, and most importantly, it was theirs. Ryder carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition. He set her down gently in the middle of the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Morgan," he said softly. "Home," Nora repeated, testing the word. It felt right. That night they lay together in the narrow bed Ryder had built himself, talking in whispers until the moon rose high. Nora rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, and felt completely safe for the first time since her mother had died. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "That I am glad I took the risk. That I am happy." "Good. I plan to keep you that way." Life at the ranch settled into a rhythm. Ryder left early each morning to work with the cattle and horses, and Nora kept the cabin, tended a small garden she planted, and found work doing sewing and mending for other ranch families. The pay was modest but honest, and it felt good to contribute. She still ground coffee beans slowly every morning, and true to his word, Ryder savored every cup. Sometimes he would come up behind her while she worked the grinder, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her neck, making her laugh and playfully scold him for being a distraction. The ranch owner, a gruff but fair man named Henry Cross, took a liking to them both. He raised Ryder's pay after 3 months when it became clear he was one of the hardest workers on the property. This allowed them to buy a few luxuries: a rocking chair for the cabin, fabric for Nora to make curtains, a new rifle for Ryder to replace his battered old one. Sunday afternoons, they would ride into Ogden to attend church and visit Mrs. Patterson. The older woman delighted in hearing about their life on the ranch, and slowly, Nora realized she had found not just a husband but a community, people who cared about her well-being. 6 months after their wedding, Nora realized she was pregnant. She told Ryder over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. They had not discussed children, and she worried he might feel it was too soon, but Ryder's face lit up with uncomplicated joy. He came around the table, pulling her into his arms, kissing her face all over until she was giggling. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Nora asked, though the answer was obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Nora, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, love, and now a family. I did not think I could be this blessed." "I am scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good mother?" "You will be wonderful," Ryder said firmly, "and nothing is going to go wrong. We will face whatever comes together, just like we always do." His confidence buoyed her own, and as the months passed and her belly grew, Nora found herself becoming excited rather than just anxious. They prepared the cabin for the baby's arrival, with Ryder building a beautiful cradle from pine wood and Nora sewing tiny clothes and blankets. Mrs. Patterson visited often, bringing gifts and advice. Other ranch wives welcomed Nora into their circle, sharing their own experiences and helping her prepare. She had never had many female friends, but now she found herself surrounded by women who supported and encouraged her. The baby, a boy they named Thomas Ryder Morgan, was born on a snowy February morning in 1879. The labor was long and difficult, with a midwife from town helping Nora through it while Ryder paced outside the cabin, driven half-mad with worry by her cries. But when he finally held his son, saw the tiny perfect face, felt the small hand wrap around his finger, he wept openly. "He is beautiful," Ryder whispered. "Nora, he is perfect." Nora, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at her husband. "Thomas Ryder, he has your eyes." "You named him after your first husband?" Ryder asked, surprised but not upset. "I named him after someone who deserves to be remembered better than he has been, and after the best man I have ever known." She reached for Ryder's hand. "Our son will have the name, but he will have your example to follow." Ryder kissed her forehead. "Thank you. For him, for everything, for choosing me." "Always," Nora promised. Motherhood transformed Nora in ways she had not expected. The fierce, protective love she felt for Thomas gave her strength she did not know she possessed. She who had once felt weak and dependent discovered she could function on little sleep, could manage a household and a baby simultaneously, could face down a coyote that got too close to the cabin with nothing but a broom and determination. Ryder was a devoted father, coming home each evening eager to hold his son, to tell him stories, to sing him songs in a surprisingly pleasant voice. He would wake in the night to help with feedings, changing Thomas's diaper and walking him when he was fussy so Nora could rest. "You are spoiling me," Nora said one night, watching him rock Thomas back to sleep. "Impossible. I could never spoil you enough to match what you have given me." Thomas grew from a tiny infant into a bright, curious toddler with his father's dark eyes and his mother's smile. He took his first steps in the cabin's main room, walking from Nora to Ryder and back again while both parents cheered. His first word was "Dada," which made Ryder beam with pride, though Nora pretended to be offended until he kissed her breathless in apology. Life was not without challenges. There were harsh winters when food ran low, and the cold seemed endless. There were illnesses that left them terrified, holding vigil over their son through fever-racked nights. There were financial worries when cattle prices dropped, or when Ryder was injured breaking a horse and could not work for weeks. But through it all, they had each other. Ryder's steady presence, his unwavering support, his genuine partnership in all aspects of their life together, gave Nora the foundation she had always lacked. And Nora's quiet strength, her ability to find joy in small moments, her deep capacity for love, gave Ryder the home and belonging he had lost so many years before. 2 years after Thomas was born, Nora gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Rose, after Ryder's lost sister. The labor was easier this time, and Emma emerged into the world with a loud cry that suggested she would not be a quiet child. "She is fierce," the midwife said approvingly. "This one will keep you on your toes." She was right. Emma was bold where Thomas was cautious, loud where he was quiet, constantly getting into mischief that made her parents laugh even as they tried to discipline her. She adored her older brother, following him everywhere, and Thomas, despite his initial jealousy at having to share his parents' attention, became fiercely protective of his little sister. When Emma was 6 months old, Henry Cross called Ryder into his office with an unexpected proposition. "You have been with me for almost 3 years now," Cross said. "You are one of the best men I have ever employed. Honest, hardworking, good with the animals and the other hands. I am getting older and my own children have no interest in ranching. I would like to make you my foreman." Ryder was stunned. "Sir, I do not know what to say." "Say yes. It comes with a significant pay increase and a larger house closer to the main ranch. You have a family now. You need more space than that little cabin." When Ryder told Nora that night, she could not quite believe it. "Foreman." "Ryder, that is wonderful. It is more responsibility, longer hours sometimes. Are you certain you are all right with it?" "Of course I am. You have earned this. You work harder than anyone I know." They moved into the foreman's house, a sturdy 4-room structure with glass windows and a real kitchen. Nora cried when she first saw it, overwhelmed by how far they had come from that first small cabin, from the boarding house, from her desperate arrival in Ogden with nothing but a carpetbag and fear. "What is wrong?" Ryder asked, alarmed by her tears. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, and sometimes that is just as overwhelming." She threw her arms around him. "I love you. I love our life. I love our children. Sometimes I worry I will wake up and discover this has all been a dream." "Not a dream," Ryder said, holding her tight. "This is real, and it is ours, and it is just the beginning." As foreman, Ryder's responsibilities grew, but so did his satisfaction with his work. He hired and trained new ranch hands, managed the cattle drives, worked with Cross to make decisions about the ranch's future. His judgment was respected, his leadership appreciated. Nora, meanwhile, became a central figure among the ranch families. She organized sewing circles, helped teach the children to read and write, tended to the sick with her growing knowledge of herbal remedies. When a family faced hardship, she was the first to organize help, remembering what it felt like to be alone and struggling. The years passed, each one adding new memories, new challenges, new joys. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved working with the horses. Emma became a skilled rider and crack shot who announced at age 8 that she intended to be a rancher herself someday. When Nora expressed concern that ranching was not a woman's profession, Emma had simply shrugged and said, "Then I will be the first." Ryder had laughed until he cried. "That is definitely your daughter," he told Nora. A third child, another son they named Jack Henry after Mrs. Patterson's late husband and their employer, arrived when Thomas was 8 and Emma was 6. He was a quiet, thoughtful child who loved books and learning, content to sit for hours listening to stories or watching the world around him with serious consideration. When Nora was 31, 8 years after arriving in Ogden, Mrs. Patterson fell ill. Nora rode into town as often as she could to help care for the woman who had given her a chance when she had nothing. She brought food, tended to the boarding house, and sat beside Mrs. Patterson's bed, reading to her and reminiscing about their first meeting. "I was hard on you, Mrs. Patterson said one afternoon, her voice weak. "You were trying to protect me," Nora replied, "and you were right to be cautious. I was naive about so much. But I was wrong about him. That Ryder of yours turned out to be everything he promised and more. He did. You are happy." "So happy," Nora said, squeezing the older woman's frail hand. "And I owe so much of it to you. You gave me work when I had nothing. You stood up for me. You were there when I needed someone. You would have made it with or without me. You have steel in you, girl. I saw it from the start." Mrs. Patterson died peacefully in her sleep a week later. The funeral was well attended, for she had touched many lives over the years. Nora wept openly, mourning the loss of a mentor and friend. Ryder stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, providing silent support. After the funeral, they learned Mrs. Patterson had left the boarding house to Constance, who had continued working there all these years. It was a fitting legacy, Nora thought. Mrs. Patterson had always believed in giving women a chance to build their own futures. Life continued its steady march forward. Henry Cross grew older and relied more and more on Ryder to manage the ranch. When Cross died in his sleep at age 73, his will revealed a final surprise. He had left the Triple Creek Ranch to Ryder Morgan in recognition of his years of loyal service and capable management. "I cannot accept this," Ryder said, staring at the deed in shock. "You must," the lawyer said. "It was his express wish. He had no heirs who wanted the ranch. He told me you had earned it 10 times over." That night, Ryder and Nora sat on their porch, watching the sun set over the land that was now theirs. Thomas, now 16, worked in the barn. Emma, 14, was practicing her rope work in the yard. Jack, 8, sat nearby reading a book about horses. "We own a ranch," Ryder said, still sounding dazed. "You earned it," Nora replied. "Everything Cross said was true. You turned this place around, made it more profitable, built something lasting." "We built it," Ryder corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you. You are my partner in everything, Nora." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember that first morning? When you walked into the kitchen and watched me grind coffee beans? Every detail. The way the light came through the window, the concentration on your face, the smell of the coffee. I knew even then that you were going to change my life. I thought you were just another drifter passing through." "I was, but you gave me a reason to stay." He tilted her face up to kiss her. "Best decision I ever made. Asking me to grind coffee for you every morning. Asking you to spend every morning with me, period." he smiled, "though the coffee is exceptional." Nora laughed, the sound carrying across the ranch they now owned, the life they had built together. Years continued to flow like the creek that gave the ranch its name, steady and sure. Thomas married a neighboring rancher's daughter, a sweet-natured woman named Grace, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the Triple Creek property. He took over much of the day-to-day cattle operations, freeing Ryder to focus on the business side of ranching. Emma, true to her childhood declaration, refused all suitors and instead became an expert in horse breeding. By the time she was 22, the horses raised at Triple Creek were known throughout Utah and beyond for their quality and temperament. She eventually married a quiet veterinarian named Samuel, who supported her ambitions rather than trying to tame them. Jack, the bookish son, went to university in Salt Lake City, the first in their family to pursue higher education. He studied agriculture and business, then returned to the ranch to apply his knowledge, helping to modernize their operations while respecting the traditions that had made them successful. Nora and Ryder grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. The passion of their early romance mellowed into something even stronger, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and unwavering commitment. They faced hardships, bitter winters and dry summers, economic downturns and personal losses, but they faced everything together. On their 20th anniversary, Ryder gifted Nora a new coffee grinder, beautifully crafted from cherry wood with brass fittings. She laughed and cried at the same time. "You remember what you said that first morning?" she asked. "Grind them for me every morning," Ryder quoted. "And you have. 20 years of mornings, and I hope for 20 more, and 20 after that." "Always," Nora promised, the same words she had spoken on their wedding day. They had 5 grandchildren by the time Nora turned 50. Thomas and Grace had 3 daughters. Emma and Samuel had 1 son and 1 daughter. The ranch house that had once seemed so large now filled regularly with the sound of children's laughter, small feet running across the floors, voices calling for grandma and grandpa. Nora loved being a grandmother, spoiling the children in ways she had never been able to spoil her own, telling them stories of their parents as children, teaching them to bake and sew and notice the small beauties in everyday life. Ryder taught them to ride, to respect the animals, to understand that ranching was not just work, but a way of life that required dedication and love. On quiet evenings, when the grandchildren had gone home and the house was peaceful again, Nora and Ryder would sit on their porch, holding hands and watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked one such evening when they were both in their 60s. "Regret what?" "Saying yes to a drifter you had known for 6 weeks, taking a chance on me." Nora turned to look at him, at the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes that came from years of smiling, the hand that had held hers through everything life had thrown at them. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "You are the best decision I ever made." "Even better than leaving Philadelphia." "Leaving Philadelphia brought me to you. So yes, even better than that." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of knowing someone completely. Nora thought about the frightened young widow who had arrived in Ogden with nothing but a carpetbag and crushing debts. She barely recognized that woman now. Life had transformed her, given her strength and purpose, and a love she had not known was possible. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked. "That morning in the kitchen, how I was grinding coffee beans slowly and you told me to grind them for you every morning. I thought you were being presumptuous." "I was," Ryder admitted with a grin, "but I was also right. You have been grinding my coffee every morning for over 30 years now. Our coffee, Nora corrected. Everything we have, we built together. True enough. He squeezed her hand. I love you, Nora Morgan. I love you too, Ryder Morgan. As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, they sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the land they had earned, wrapped in the love they had chosen. It had not been easy, this life they had forged from nothing but hope and hard work. But it had been worth it, every struggle, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, because in the end they had each other. And that, Nora thought, was worth more than all the gold in the West. The seasons turned, bringing more changes. Jack married a teacher from Ogden, a brilliant woman named Helen who started a school on the ranch for the workers' children. Emma and Samuel expanded the horse breeding operation, earning awards at shows across the western states. Thomas became known as one of the finest cattlemen in Utah, sought after for advice by ranchers from as far away as Montana. Nora and Ryder settled into the comfortable rhythm of their later years. They still rose early, and Nora still ground coffee beans slowly every morning while Ryder watched, the ritual as sacred now as it had been decades ago. They had breakfast together, discussing the day ahead, sharing observations about their children and grandchildren, comfortable in the life they had built. On Nora's 60th birthday, the family threw a grand celebration. Children and grandchildren gathered, along with friends from town, neighboring ranchers and workers from Triple Creek. Tables groaned under the weight of food, music filled the air, and laughter rang out across the property. As Nora looked around at the gathering, at the people who filled her life with joy and purpose, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She caught Ryder's eye across the crowd, and he smiled at her, that same warm smile that had first captured her heart all those years ago in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. Later, when the party had wound down and most of the guests had departed, their children approached them with a surprise. Thomas carried a large wrapped package, his sisters flanking him. "We wanted to give you something special," Emma said, "something to mark this occasion." Nora unwrapped the gift carefully, revealing a beautiful painting. It showed the old boarding house in Ogden, rendered in careful detail. In the foreground, a younger Ryder leaned in the kitchen doorway, watching a young Nora as she ground coffee beans. The artist had captured the moment perfectly, the tenderness in Ryder's expression, the peace on Nora's face, the beginning of everything they would become. "How did you?" Nora started, tears streaming down her face. "We talked to people who remembered the boarding house," Jack explained. "Found an artist in Salt Lake City who specializes in historical scenes. We wanted to give you the moment where it all began." Ryder stood beside Nora, his own eyes damp. "It is perfect, thank you." They hung the painting in their bedroom where they could see it every morning when they woke. It became Nora's favorite possession, not because of its artistic merit, though it was beautifully done, but because it reminded her that the small moments mattered. The simple act of grinding coffee beans, done with care and attention, had somehow led to this full, rich life. As they grew older still, they began to slow down. Ryder's leg, broken so many years ago, troubled him more in cold weather. Nora's hands, despite years of using salve, developed arthritis that made fine work difficult. But they adapted, accepting help from their children when needed, finding new ways to contribute. Ryder spent more time mentoring his sons and son-in-law, sharing the wisdom accumulated over decades of ranching. Nora focused on her grandchildren, passing down recipes and stories, teaching them the values that had sustained her through hardship. When Ryder turned 70, he announced he was officially retiring and turning full control of the ranch over to Thomas, with equal shares for Emma and Jack. The three siblings had already been running most operations for years, but the formal recognition of their authority felt significant. "Are you sure about this?" Thomas asked. "You are still sharp as a tack, Dad. We need your guidance." "You will always have my guidance if you want it," Ryder assured him. "But the ranch is yours now. You have earned it, all three of you. Your mother and I want to spend our remaining years enjoying what we have built, not worrying about the day-to-day operations." With the ranch in capable hands, Nora and Ryder found a new freedom. They took trips to places they had always wanted to see but never had time for. They visited San Francisco, marveling at the ocean Nora had never seen. They traveled to Denver, where they attended the opera and stayed in a grand hotel. They even went to Philadelphia, where Nora showed Ryder the streets of her childhood, finding closure with the past she had fled so long ago. But they always returned to Triple Creek, to the home that held their hearts. No matter how beautiful other places might be, nothing compared to watching the sun rise over their mountains, to the sound of the creek running full with snowmelt, to the smell of coffee grinding slowly in their kitchen. On their 45th anniversary, their family gathered again, now including great-grandchildren who ran around the property with the same wild joy their grandparents had shown. Nora and Ryder sat together in rocking chairs on the porch, watching the controlled chaos with amusement. 45 years, Nora mused. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever. "The best kind of forever," Ryder said. He took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "Do you know what I think about most when I look back?" "What?" "That morning in the kitchen. How close I came to riding on to Wyoming without ever speaking to you. What if I had not been hungry that day? What if I had not woken early? What if I had not walked into that kitchen?" "But you did," Nora said softly. "And I am grateful every day that you did." "I think we were meant to find each other," Ryder said. "Call it fate, call it God's plan, call it blind luck. But somehow, against all odds, two people who needed each other found their way to the same place at the same time. And you asked me to grind coffee beans for you every morning. Best request I ever made." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together for more than 4 decades, their oldest great-granddaughter, a serious child of 6 named Rose, climbed into Nora's lap. "Grandma Nora, will you tell me the story again?" she asked. "Which story, sweetheart?" "About how you and Grandpa Ryder fell in love." Nora smiled, exchanging a glance with Ryder. They had told this story countless times, but it never grew old. "Well," Nora began, settling the child more comfortably in her lap. "It started on a morning in summer in a boarding house in Ogden. I was grinding coffee beans slowly, taking my time because my mother had taught me that anything worth doing was worth doing well. And then I heard a voice behind me." "Grandpa Ryder's voice," Rose interjected excitedly. "That is right. Your Grandpa Ryder had just arrived in town, planning to pass through on his way to somewhere else. But he stopped in the kitchen and watched me grind those coffee beans. And do you know what he said?" Rose nodded vigorously, but Nora continued anyway, loving the ritual of the telling. "He said, 'Grind them for me every morning,' just like that, as if he already knew we would spend every morning together for the rest of our lives." "And you did," Rose said. "We did," Nora confirmed, looking at Ryder with all the love that 45 years had only deepened. "Every single morning I have ground coffee for your grandfather, and every single morning I have been grateful that he asked." "That is the best story," Rose declared, then wiggled down and ran off to play with her cousins. Ryder reached over and took Nora's hand. "Still true, every word." "Always true," Nora agreed. They sat together as darkness fell, surrounded by family, wrapped in the love that had sustained them through everything. The ranch that had once belonged to Henry Cross, then to them, now belonged to their children and would one day belong to their grandchildren. The Triple Creek would continue, a legacy built not just on land and cattle and horses, but on the foundation of two people who had taken a chance on each other. Nora thought about the young widow who had arrived in Ogden with nothing, terrified and alone. She thought about the drifter who had been running from grief and loss for 8 years. She thought about how they had found each other in a boarding house kitchen, over something as simple as grinding coffee beans. Small moments, she had learned, could change everything. A kind word, a generous gesture, a man watching a woman work and seeing not just what she was doing but who she was. These small moments built into larger ones, into conversations and courtship, into marriage and family, into a life rich with meaning and love. As they prepared for bed that night, Ryder helped Nora with the buttons she could no longer manage easily with her arthritic fingers. She braided his hair, gone completely silver now but still thick. They moved around each other with the practiced ease of decades, each anticipating the other's needs, each giving and receiving care in equal measure. "Ryder," Nora said as they settled into bed. "Yes, thank you. For what? For walking into that kitchen, for staying in Ogden, for asking me to grind coffee beans for you every morning, for giving me the life I never knew I could have." Ryder pulled her close, her head resting on his shoulder the way it had for 45 years. "Thank you for saying yes, for taking a chance on a drifter with nothing to offer but his heart, for building this life with me, for being my partner in everything." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms in the house they had made a home, on the land they had poured their lives into, surrounded by the family that was their greatest accomplishment. The years continued their march. Nora and Ryder grew frailer, accepting the inevitable slowing that came with age. Their children hovered, worried and protective, but the couple maintained their independence as much as possible. They still shared breakfast every morning, still discussed the ranch operations even though they were no longer in charge, still sat on their porch in the evenings watching the sun set. When Nora was 73, Ryder fell ill with pneumonia. The doctor came from town, did what he could, but everyone knew the prognosis was grim. For 2 weeks, Nora sat beside his bed, holding his hand, reading to him, reminding him of all the moments that had made up their life together. "You remember the day we met?" she asked during one of his more lucid moments. "Every detail," Ryder rasped, his voice weak but his eyes still bright when he looked at her. "You were so beautiful, so focused. I knew I had to know you. You said I ground coffee slowly. You did everything with such care. I loved that about you immediately." Tears streamed down Nora's face. "You cannot leave me, not yet. We have more mornings ahead of us." Ryder squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "We have had 51 years of mornings, Nora. 51 years more than I ever dreamed I would have. We have been so blessed. It is not enough, it will never be enough, I know. But what we have had, the life we built together, the love we shared, that is everything. That is more than most people get in a dozen lifetimes." He pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. "Promise me something, anything. Do not stop living when I am gone. The ranch needs you. Our children and grandchildren need you. Let them take care of you the way we took care of each other. Ryder, please. Promise me, Nora." "I promise," she whispered, knowing she would do anything he asked. Even this impossible thing. Ryder died that night, peacefully in his sleep with Nora's hand in his. She held him as the sun rose, unable to let go, unable to accept that the man who had been her partner for over 50 years was truly gone. The funeral was attended by hundreds. Ryder had touched many lives over the decades, not just through his work but through his character. Person after person came forward to share stories of his kindness, his integrity, his wisdom. The testimonials painted a picture of a man who had lived well and loved deeply. And while this brought Nora some comfort, it could not fill the gaping hole in her heart. The months that followed were the hardest of Nora's life. She had weathered poverty, loss, hardship, and fear, but nothing compared to living without Ryder. The mornings were the worst. She still ground coffee beans slowly, habit ingrained over 51 years, but the ritual felt hollow without him there to drink it, to smile at her, to tell her it was the best he had ever tasted. Her children worried about her. They took turns staying at the ranch house, making sure she ate, making sure she was not alone too much. But Nora was not the young woman who had arrived in Ogden all those years ago. She had survived before and would survive again, even if surviving without Ryder felt like the cruelest test life could offer. Slowly, painfully, she found a new rhythm. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, sharing stories of their grandfather, keeping his memory alive for the younger ones who would not remember him as clearly. She worked in her garden, the one Ryder had helped her plant over 50 years ago, finding peace in the familiar tasks. And every morning, she ground coffee beans slowly, carefully, with the same attention she had given it that first morning in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen. It was her way of honoring the man who had loved her, who had asked her to grind coffee for him every morning, who had kept that simple promise and so many others for over half a century. One morning, about a year after Ryder's death, her youngest great-grandchild, a boy of 4 named Ryder after his great-grandfather, wandered into the kitchen while she was grinding coffee. "What are you doing, Grandma Nora?" he asked. "Grinding coffee beans, sweetheart." "Why do you do it so slow?" Nora smiled, remembering a similar question asked so long ago. "Because anything worth doing is worth doing well. My mother taught me that, and your great-grandfather Ryder loved it." "Tell me about great-grandpa Ryder," the boy requested, climbing into a chair. And Nora did. She told him about a drifter who walked into a kitchen and decided to stay. About a man who saw her grinding coffee and fell in love with the care she put into simple tasks. About a partnership built on respect and trust and unwavering commitment. About a love that had survived everything life threw at it and had grown stronger with each passing year. As she spoke, Nora realized that Ryder was not truly gone. He lived on in their children, in the ranch they had built together, in the values they had passed down through generations. He lived on in the stories she told, in the memories she cherished, in the love that had shaped her into who she was. She would miss him every day for the rest of her life. The ache of his absence would never fully fade. But she had promised him she would keep living, and Nora had always kept her promises. Nora lived to be 87 years old, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even a few great-great-grandchildren. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still grinding coffee slowly every morning, still tending her garden, still telling stories of the cowboy who had changed her life. When she died peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, the family found her bedroom exactly as she had left it. The painting of her and Ryder in the boarding house kitchen hung on the wall. On her bedside table was a faded photograph of their wedding day, alongside the jar of hand salve Ryder had given her over 50 years before, carefully preserved. And in the kitchen, the beautiful cherry wood coffee grinder Ryder had gifted her on their 20th anniversary sat on the counter, polished and cared for, a testament to a love that began with the simple act of grinding coffee beans and grew into something magnificent. They buried Nora beside Ryder on a hillside overlooking the Triple Creek Ranch, in a spot they had chosen together years before. At the funeral, Their eldest great-granddaughter, Rose, now a grown woman with children of her own, spoke about the legacy her great-grandparents had left. "They taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice," Rose said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "Every morning for over 50 years, my great-grandmother ground coffee for my great-grandfather. It was such a small thing, but it represented something much larger. The choice to show up, to care, to put effort into the small moments that make up a life together. They taught us that anything worth doing is worth doing well, that second chances are possible, that love can heal even the deepest wounds." As the service concluded and the family began to disperse, Thomas, now an old man himself, stood with his siblings looking out over the ranch their parents had built. "They did all right for themselves," Emma said softly. "Better than all right," Jack agreed. "They built something that will last for generations." "Not just the ranch," Thomas added. "They showed us how to love, how to work, how to build a life worth living. That is the real inheritance." The three siblings stood together on the hillside as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in oranges and pinks, just as it had done every evening of their parents' lives. The Triple Creek Ranch stretched out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to hard work and dedication. But more than that, it was a testament to love, to a widow with nothing who took a chance on a new start, to a drifter who found a reason to stop drifting, to a simple morning in a boarding house kitchen where coffee beans were ground slowly and carefully, where a man watched a woman work and saw his future, where a woman heard a request to grind coffee every morning and said yes. From that small moment, something beautiful had grown. A love story that spanned over 50 years. A family that would carry forward for generations. A legacy built not on grand gestures but on the daily choice to love, to care, to show up for each other morning after morning after morning. And somewhere, perhaps, Ryder and Nora were together again, sharing breakfast in whatever comes after this life, with coffee ground slowly and carefully, the way anything worth doing should be done, the way love should be done, every single morning forever. The ranch continued to thrive under the care of subsequent generations. Each one added their own touches while honoring the foundation that Ryder and Nora had built. The cherry wood coffee grinder became a family heirloom, passed down through the generations, each recipient learning the story of the cowboy and the widow who fell in love over coffee. The painting of that first morning hung in the main ranch house, a reminder to every generation of where it all began. Children grew up hearing the story of great-great-grandma Nora, who arrived in Ogden with nothing, and great-great-grandpa Ryder, who walked into a kitchen and found everything. Years turned into decades, and decades into a century, but the love story endured. It became part of the family mythology, a tale told and retold, each generation finding new meaning in the simple truth that small moments matter, that love requires daily attention, that the best things in life are worth doing slowly and carefully. And every morning, somewhere on the Triple Creek Ranch, someone ground coffee beans, the aroma drifting through the house, a small ritual connecting the present to the past, honoring the legacy of two people who took a chance on each other and built something that would last forever.